had someone call yesterday asking when we were gonna lift it.
Oh, yeah. Hey, the messenger.
Yeah,
Onto the bulletin.
I'll give you the phone number to the water district.
This is the only thing
What do
we
you
sound
do
like.
with it? What John Lee wrote. You look wild.
I did go on their website to make sure that there was.
On your water. Oh, I.
Might not pop up until
Oh, that could be.
Oh, goodness,
Oh, yeah.
Although I'm
that's fine. That's what
got it going.
You have the meeting started?
Hmm.
Okay. Can everyone hear us? Can everyone hear us? Yes? All right. Do you want me to show you how you can set it up so that you can do something else? You can have something else here and something else there. Or you
I'm fine with that.
Okay. All right. We're good. Sorry about that.
Okay, thank you all for your patience. Let's see, start off by pledging to our flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Everyone can still hear us?
Yes. Okay. First item on our agenda this evening is to hold a public hearing on the zoning, chapter 140-26 signs. We have some suggested amendments to the sign ordinance and go through those. Background on these amendments is to attempt to make some accommodation for proposed commercial, retail, industrial development along Route 236 Dow Highway corridor in our I-1 zone. These proposed changes apply only to the I-1 zone, which would be across the street from the high school. It's unique in the fact that the lots don't have frontage on the highway. The frontage along that corridor is owned by CMP with at least two other gas company easements granted by CMP to the gas companies, the transmission lines. So there's kind of like an overlay requirements of the gas company because they have security and safety issues with respect to that, and as well as CMP has safety and capital concerns about their right of way and their equipment. So in order to promote or help promote the industrial development, we set up the industrial zone there many years ago with the hope of spurring some economic and community development within the town. Prior to that point, the industrial zone was where outdoor golf course is. And we found out that that was not great planning because it's traffic isolated by having to drive through either Berwick, North Berwick, or South Berwick in order to get trucks into that proposed industrial site. So we changed it that many years ago to the current I-1 and I-2 zones. So, like I said, this is an accommodation so that some amount of advertising would be visible from Route 236 and help promote Town Road and other associated properties off of that. Like I said, this is zoning ordinance chapter 140-26. And the copy that I have has underlined sections A, subparagraphs 1 through 6, and then 7 has further sub paragraphs A, B, and C, 8, and then there's that was under A, then there's B, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, then C, 1, 2, 2A, 2B, 2C, D. But the changes here fall under subparagraph E. I'll read those. For retail and commercial uses in the industrial zone, 2, one freestanding or berm monument sign up to 64 square feet is allowed for each street frontage. That, there's basically no change to that. Under F, which is inserted, for retail or commercial parks, parenthetically, more than 5 businesses in one complex, closed parenthesis, located in the industrial zone 1, a waiver may be granted for an off-premises sign by the South Berwick Town Council. Prior to an application submission, the applicant must secure approval from the off-premise owner, CMP, and from Maine DOT for erection of the sign. 1, there shall be no more than 1 sign allowed per business park entity. 2, the sign area shall not exceed 100 square feet in total. The 2 signs must reflect mirror images and not exceed 100 square feet per side. 4, individual business tenants' signs shall not exceed 2 square feet, and the sign height shall not exceed 18 feet. The former section F is changed to section G, and that's it for the proposed changes. For the public hearing, we'll conduct it in the same way we do our other public hearings. Members of the public who wish to speak can do so. You'll be recognized. And Valerie, why don't you keep time?
Yep.
Okay. And so we'll recognize people who want to speak for or against for 3 minutes. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak at this time?
Mr. Chair, before we open it up to the public, I just had a question for clarity and consistency. We're defining commercial park, but then what we're adding in F refers to business park. Is there a discrepancy there with the 2 different terminology, or should we keep that all consistent with referring to it as a commercial park?
Where do you see business?
So I see business in 1 allowed per business park entity. I didn't know if that conflicted at all with a commercial park.
Well, it says for retail or commercial uses, no, for commercial, retail or commercial parks, excuse me. So, but again, we can discuss that when we get into the meat of it. I didn't want to discuss any changes
Okay,
at this time until we heard from the public.
sure.
And because I have,
You have some things as well that you want to bring up.
yeah, so I just wanted to not confuse things by,
Okay, starting to pick it apart already.
and then folks won't know what they're talking about
Okay.
as far as, and not that they're, talking about, but they won't know which document we're referring to, so we'll keep it straight.
Okay.
For the text that we have in our supporting documents.
That's fine.
That works
that's
for
fine.
you?
Yep.
Okay, I guess there's one other piece here, and that is under chapter 140-6 amendments. subsection B3. There's a requirement for the planning board to report its recommendation regarding the proposed amendment to the public, at the public hearing. So I guess, Jeff, I understand that you're speaking for the planning board this evening?
Yes, I'm prepared to speak.
Okay, so why don't you offer the planning recommendation with respect to the proposed amendment to the sign ordinance?
Certainly. I had my prepared statements here. I'll try and keep it brief. I've been trying to time myself. So my name is Jeff Minahan. I'm up on 35 Buttonwood Road. I'm also on the planning board. Planning board and I come before you today in opposition to the proposed modification to this ordinance. The planning board has submitted written testimony. I didn't see it included in supporting documents, but I'll address some of those in my statement right now. In February 2021, at the request of the town council, the planning board considered possible changes to the sign ordinance for I1 and I2 zones. Two particular criteria were at issue. One was changing the requirement that business signs be located on premise of the business, and two was changing the maximum dimensions of the on-premise signs. At the planning board meeting on February 17th, the board considered these changes, and excerpts were included in the testimony, but they show that Chairperson Straub had shared with us the municipal sign that the town would be installing within the island at the entrance of Pumpkin Town Road. And we also discussed a number of other things. One was Pumpkin Town Road is a public road and there are several undeveloped lots and potential businesses that will have access to Pumpkin Town Road. Two, a larger scaled sign is suggested to be placed on the premises at Pumpkin Town Place building. Three, there is a safety concern with installing a larger size business sign along Route 236. Four, there was not an anticipation of commercial development in this area when the current sign ordinance was developed, and it did not consider current commercial developments and changes. And five, in the state of Maine, an off-premise sign is considered a billboard sign. Billboard signs are prohibited in the state of Maine. A motion was to recommend to the town council that we do not change or waive the off-premise sign. That was approved 4-1. And another motion was to recommend the town council allow an increase in the on-premise size, sign size for the I1 and I2 zones. That was approved 5-0. The council's proposed changes to the on-site premises requirements to allow off-premise signs is the exact opposite of what the planning board's recommendations are. The planning board continues its position and opposes the proposed changes. The planning board suggested that the size of an on-premise sign could be enlarged in the industrial zones, but no changes should be considered to off-premise requirement. In preparation for the planning board's February 12th meeting regarding these issues, the Southborough town planner, Dave Galbraith, he drafted a memo, which he correctly outlined many of the reasons for the planning board's recommendations. And in particular, there are three that we wanted to highlight. One was, he said, most, if not all, Maine municipal sign ordinances do not permit off-premises signs. And then the other 2 points that he made were, number two was allowing off-premises signs would undoubtedly have other businesses seek to locate their desired signs off property. This could lead to a large amount of additional unnecessary visual clutter if the town decided to allow such a thing, which he believed would still be against state law it would need to be equally applied for all properties, which could result in a glut of new advertising signs along corridors. It could further open possibility for a multiple ground lease sign locations on this very same property. Regulating advertising, he said, has its limitations, and out-of-town business may well try to advertise within South Berwick, directing business away from our own local businesses. And the third point he made was reducing visual clutter along main highways and state routes has been regulated in Maine for over 40 years. Maine Governor James B. Longley signed into law an act to eventually remove about 8,500 roadside billboards in the state. When the billboard ban law officially took effect in January 1st, 1978, it took about 6-7 years for all those billboards to be eliminated. Since 2013, 9 separate bills have gone to the Maine state legislature seeking to adjust the sign regulations, but all have been ultimately rejected. And he continues, I believe the sign location being proposed as off-site is determined by the town sign ordinance would constitute a billboard sign. With that in mind, the planning board's position is that in addition to those points and it being directly across from Marshwood High School, they combine to make it inappropriate to modify the ordinance as proposed currently. So to summarize, the planning board recommends that the modification proposed to 140-26 by the council not be adopted per our recommendation on February 12th, 2021. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, I have a quick clarification for the planning board. Jeff, just so I understood you correctly, did you say that David from the Southern Maine Planning Commission was the one that said that he believes that this current policy being considered would constitute a billboard?
That's correct, yes.
Thank you.
Anybody else have a question for Jeff?
I got some statements. I don't know if I got questions, but I got a few statements. I don't know if you want to bring them up now or later.
Oh, we'll do what people have to say.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Anybody-
guys.
Well, anybody else speaking for or against the proposed ordinance amendment? Okay. I guess I'll recognize Sean.
Mr. Happy. So, understanding the planning board's view, but we're quoting a 43-year-old law that was enacted to take billboards down along the side of highways. We as a town spent $1 million for a road. $1 million for a road to a business park that we can't advertise for. That does not sit well with me at all. I don't understand how it's inappropriate to have a sign for businesses across from the high school. I'm confused by that one also. There's nothing in the business park that's inappropriate. Why would a sign be inappropriate to have across from the high school? We have to find a way to advertise for those businesses in our business park. And it's not gonna work with a 2x3 sign on the window or on the wall. As far as looking at it with, if we change it in the I1, I2 district, it could go somewhere else. There's nowhere to go off-site in town to put signs. Go through our downtown. You have sidewalks. That's all we have. So we could limit it to just I1 and I2, and we should. We promised this business that we would support them as a town, and we're not. We're letting all those business owners down, from the people that own the building to the small businesses that are in that business. We are letting them down if we don't find a way to let them advertise. They're gonna go out of business. We're gonna have an empty building, and we're gonna go back to what we've had for 25 years, a rock quarry in our building, in our industrial park. That's my 2 cents on the subject.
Anybody else? And you had some things that you wanted to say?
I did. I didn't know if the business park had officially gotten approval and waiver rights from CMP to place an off-site premise sign there. Is that already?
It's my
squared
understanding
away?
that they did, yes.
Okay,
The former town manager reported that to us, that both DOT and CMP have approved a location.
okay. And then I guess then another question for Jeff, if you don't mind, from the planning board's perspective is, did the planning board consider tweaking this at all to make it something that would be okay for an adjustment, or going further from that, what we sent to you? Did the planning board have any ideas with how to boost the industrial complex and the businesses and promote them in that area with any kind of tweaks to our current sign ordinance?
Yeah, so I think really that was what was sort of evident with our meeting notes. What our point was is saying we recommend that we adjust the current ordinance where we can increase the sign size on premise and not have to create off-site signage. Our stance was against the off-site, but look at trying to help out on-site. I think in our minds, we were talking, you could put a bigger sign at the mouth of where you enter into the development on the left as you're heading up the hill. You know, if you put signs there, when people driving up Pumpkin Town Road, you're looking and you have a sign there, and you could advertise there on a public road in South Berwick.
And did Mr. Glidden have any comments on that idea?
I don't believe that Mr. Glidden has been present in any of our conversations.
The only drawback to that, it's a public road, that the only reason you're on that public road is to go to a business you don't know exists. It's not like it's public road like Route 4 or my road that everybody drives down Hooper Sands. It's a shortcut. You're only going up Pumpkin Town if you're going to Bricks and Dance Works or one of the businesses that's there. So if you can only see it realistically, if you're turning and driving up, that's not helping catch the traffic that's driving by, which is what they're looking to do, which is what Elliott does. If you drive down Elliott, Kittery, they all have the signs for their industrial park right out on 236. And that was, I know Mr. Glidden had brought that up, Mr. Howarth had brought that up. You get down Route 1 to the Kittery outlets. The signs are at the edge of the road for the Kittery outlets, so you know what stores are in the outlet. You don't have to drive in to see what stores are there. That's all these business owners are looking for.
Correct. I'm not sure if I need to rebut that, but I think that you would have to look at the property and see that CMP is not blocking their way to the road front there. So I don't believe that it's an apples to apples comparison there.
They have CMP's permission to put a sign on the property, on CMP's right of way. The Pumpkin Town Place owners have CMP permission to put a sign in the right of way. So it's not CMP that's blocking them from doing it. It's the town of South Berwick. That's the way I see it. Anybody?
Well, we've heard from our code enforcement officer.
Can I interrupt?
Please,
Because we're in the public hearing part of things here.
yeah,
What I'd like to do is, before we get into back and forth and so to speak, this is the time to gather information. If we want to discuss and debate the merits of that, we have it's gonna be,
New business number 1.
that is simple.
new business number one.
I'll
So,
hold my thoughts until then.
Hmm?
I'll hold my thoughts until then.
well, it's,
Yeah,
we're here to, gather information and not necessarily go back and forth on it. We have the planning board's recommendation, we have their reasons, and we thank them for doing that because it's good information.
Yep.
So, if there's no other facts to bring up by the council, I can add that as part of the genesis of the new language, had a lot to do with the speed on Route 236. I believe that's zoned for 55 at that point, if it's not school flashing hours. So there was a question in my mind about the effectiveness of a sign as you're blasting along, making sure no one's gonna come out of one of the two school entrances or Town Road. I mean, that's just how I drive. Matter of fact, I avoid it because I don't really like straight away, so I go other ways. But there was a question in my mind about the actual effectiveness of there's a 1x2 sign for individual businesses. And then we applied the other pieces that are going on right now, which are the sail type flags. They look kind of like a sail on a windsurfer that are out there. And I understand those can be out there for up to 30 days. Take them down for a day and put them back up again. And I'm wondering if those will disappear. Haven't heard anything about that. But in terms of visual clutter, that's a good one. And the efficacy of those sail type signs, I don't know. But that will change if we can ever get the warrants to pass. Warrants are the analysis by DOT about putting in a traffic light at that intersection. We've applied for that. We wanted to spend some TIF money on that. But the warrants aren't there. In other words, the justification to DOT that the light is actually warranted and needed at that location. So, but at some point in time, unfortunately, sometimes these lights go up when there's a problem, or has been a problem, accidents, things like that. But that'll change. So the efficacy of the sign will improve if someone's sitting there at a traffic light. That's all I had. Okay, if there's nothing else, we'll close the public hearing. And we'll move on to our regular town council meeting. Close the public hearing at 7:03. At 7:01 by the computer. Okay, we have the roll call, we have the full council. We have the interim town manager, and we have the town clerk present, and members of the public tuning in via Zoom. As a matter of protocol, seeing that we're all present in person, the votes don't need to be roll call. We can just have the vote as we normally would do by raising our hands or saying yeas and nays to various motions as we do our business tonight. Okay, first item of business is the approval of the following minutes. Board of Assessors from July 13, 2021.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the Board of Assessors minutes written from July 13th, 2021 as written.
Second.
Any discussion on the Board of Assessors from July 13th? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Opposed, that motion passes 5-0. Town Council of July 13th, 2021.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the Town Council meeting minutes of July 13th, 2021 as written.
Second.
Any discussion on the minutes? I didn't see anything. Okay, all those in favor of the Town Council minutes of July 13th, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed, that motion passes 5-0. Signing the treasurer's warrant, and I'd like to add something here. Thank you very much for writing the date and the amount.
Yes.
So we don't have to flip pages back and forth.
Makes it a
So
lot easier.
it's terrific.
Great.
Okay, so we have treasurer's warrant dated July 22nd, 2021 for $131,320.03 for fiscal year 21.
Mr. Chair, motion to sign the treasurer's warrant from July 22nd, 2021. and the amount as read.
Second,
Any discussion on the warrant?
I was wondering what the $1,510 was from Staples.
Definitely office equipment.
Okay.
No, that one's not. It's Staples. It was the chairs and the town manager's office, and Amy got a new chair.
Okay,
And there was a few other regular, normal end of year office supplies that we had.
okay, thanks.
Any other questions or comments with respect to signing the treasurer's warrant? All those in favor of signing the $131,000 warrant, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None opposed. That passes 5-0. Second is also July 22nd, 2021, in the amount of $495,653.33. This is against fiscal year 22.
Mr. Chair, motion to sign the treasurer's warrant dated July 22nd, 2021, in the amount of $495,653.
second,
Any questions on signing that warrant?
Outlook Golf Course, Jen, or
That was a return of money for their escrow for the progress that they've done on Bittersweet.
Anything else? Okay, all those in favor of signing that warrant, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? There's none opposed. That motion passes 5-0. Reports and correspondence. Do we have any reports or correspondence this evening? Okay. Public comment. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak on items that are not on the agenda? Town managers report, Jennifer.
The road paving update is we are complete on Academy Street, Island Street, and Paul Street, and Route 236. Next to be done is Harvey's Cut and the Pumpkin Town Road overlay. The striping on the road is now to be expected to be done late August, is what Jay has been told. Usually is done in June, but due to the paint delays, it was postponed. The annual audit is now scheduled for the week of September 20th to the 24th with Peter Hall. And I did start working on the hire, rehire draft policy. I've been talking with the Dunkwit, North Berwick, the main PERS to make sure that we're making a draft of everything that we are following the laws for the main PERS program. So I will have a draft ready on the August 10th meeting for us to discuss. And in light of all the CDC guidelines changing, we definitely need to keep an eye on that. I actually got an update on my phone earlier today that Governor Mills is having them review it in the state of Maine, and they should come out with some new guidelines if we're gonna change anything sometime tomorrow. So I'll make sure we stay on top of that. And this fall, we do still plan on doing a road study for 236 by Marshwood. Once the school is back up fully functional, we'll be back up to the full road traffic. So that would be a good time to have them come out and do that study. So Jay and I do still plan to have that done this fall. And some sad news, one of our firefighters did pass away last week. Not in the line of duty, but our crew was there helping to revive one of their own. His funeral will be this Thursday. It's Matthew Ballou. That will be this Thursday. And at 1 o'clock, they are going to have the procession of all the fire trucks come by through town. And his funeral will be at the church here on the corner. So I just want to make sure everyone's aware of that.
What time's the service?
The trucks are gonna go through at 1, I believe. The showing is from 2 to 4 and the funeral is at 5.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Unfinished business, medical marijuana caregiver retail store / cultivation and production facilities. Anybody want to make a comment on that from the public? what I'd like to do on this is, as we know, there's several fronts on this particular topic. And given the curfew, I'd like to focus our discussion this evening on cultivation and production facilities. Retail stores, the end of that moratorium is on October 10th. The cultivation ordinance, cultivation moratorium expires on August 20th. So there's time is of the essence in terms of our own discussions, and I'd like to focus on that this evening to move that ahead. There are time constraints with respect to notices. We have a planning board recommendation and summary memo that's dated July 13th. And thought there is to have a joint planning board council public hearing. And the suggested date for that is August 17th, which would bring us, and that would also, we would also have a special council meeting. That's an off week for us. But to have a council meeting, a special council meeting with the one topic agenda, which would be the review of that.
That's Tuesday.
That's Tuesday, the
Okay.
17th.
I like that.
So you're proposing Tuesday the 17th to, sorry, hold a special meeting?
Joint.
Well, there'll be a
The
public
joint.
hearing, a joint public hearing
Mhm.
between the planning board and the council
Okay.
to review the proposed, well, it's a new ordinance on medical marijuana cultivation facilities. And then following that public hearing, we would have convene a special meeting of the council. So because it's an off week, we have to have a special meeting to do that. So we would do that, and I would suggest we have simply one agenda item for that special meeting, which would be to vote up or vote down the changes. And I believe if we voted up, that the proposed ordinance be drafted with an emergency preamble to make the ordinance effective immediately on our vote. Otherwise, we'd have to wait for 30 days to be effective, and then we're going to be in limbo for those number of days between the 20th and say around September 17th.
Okay.
So that would be a bit of housekeeping on that. And I believe the emergency is justified because time is of the essence in terms of getting that in.
All right, so that's 3 weeks from now. We had discussed when we met with the planning board last time, the importance it would be of visiting, and we had suggested Sweet Dirt as a place that David had some connections with, just to get a better idea conceptually of what cultivation is and what that looks like. Many of us talked about the value that could bring us as far as like data finding. It looks like we have enough time to do that. I actually know the CEO of Sweet Dirt, Jim Henry. If you want me to reach out to him and see perhaps if next Tuesday we could schedule a tour, just so we have all the facts and the data pieces. That was something that the planning board and the town council, we brought up a few times about how we all don't know, except for John, a lot about the industry. And so it might be helpful for us to learn a bit more before we make large overreaching policy decisions.
If more than 2 of us attend that,
Yes,
it needs to be posted as a meeting.
okay,
So we're looking at,
I could ask for the 3rd, for August 3rd, if he's.
okay, so that would,
I'm gonna be honest, I don't know that I would be able to, I'm okay with everything that's being thrown out from like a scheduling perspective. I don't know if I'll be able to be there on Tuesday, but certainly if there, you guys can go. I don't wanna like derail the like scheduling conversation, but I do have some just like more general points on this topic that I'd like to bring up. Like, for example, I don't feel like the council ever had a discussion on this particular topic, medical growth, as to the need in our town. And I'm sort of, Jack, I'm remembering, you know, sort of when we passed this medical storefront ordinance, and I remember you voted against because your perspective had sort of changed a little bit as to the need. And I'm sort of feeling that way on this topic, and I just am curious. It's perhaps inconvenient for me to bring this up at this point because a lot of work has been done, but I'm just curious. We really never discussed as a council and made a decision that this was something that we needed. We never officially kind of discussed opting in, you know. I felt like this was sort of something that was, to be frank, sort of pushed upon us, and I would love to see if anyone else has any other thoughts on that.
Well, the purpose of tonight's meeting, that's why I wanted to focus on this tonight, was to have a back and forth.
Yep.
Give and take on this overall subject, because we haven't had the opportunity to review what the planning board has given us. We haven't had the opportunity to get the feelings or preferences with respect to each other. And so that's all on the table tonight. And so I did write a memo to the planning board. A lot of it was background. There was a question at a certain point in time. You know, the planning board wanted to know why we were moving ahead with this. And so I drafted a memo to the planning board and went through the various timelines. And there is a point of ambiguity with respect to agriculture, and particularly agriculture as listed in our tables as agriculture non-livestock. And we have correspondence in the file from attorney Tammy Snow. And she makes the point of saying that essentially there's no difference on the main law between marijuana as agriculture and tomato as agriculture. It's you know, agriculture is agriculture. So there was a suggestion by Phil Saucier of Bernstein Shore, our town attorney, that we define medical marijuana cultivation, create performance standards for it, and then zone it appropriately in the place it's going to do the least harm. I embrace that because I felt, and I still feel, as though that our neighborhoods and our overall zoning is threatened by poorly written laws by the legislature with respect to both categories of adult use and medical. And it's, you know, it seems like it's a huge hole, and that's why we're, and, you know, part of the memo of the planning board on July 13th was to recommend strongly licensing for testimony on that, because, you know, we have suspicion that the Office of Marijuana Policy really can't walk their fences.
So that's how we got to the moratorium, because Mallory made a very good point. We never opted in, but this turned us around when they considered that agriculture.
Yeah.
Why the opt-in, opt-out policy didn't work and why we went to the moratorium.
Right.
Because I was the same way with that when Mallory and I spoke just prior to this, of struggling with why we went to a moratorium if it was an opt-in, opt-out. But now because of the letter from Phil and background, yeah, that's why we had to do the moratorium.
But,
So,
and I agree with the ambiguity of the law, and I agree with that our personal ordinance definition of agriculture, we hammed this out with Phil pretty hardcore on the phone, with making sure that that wasn't, it was too vague and needed to be refined, and it opened us up for it happening in all zones. However, going back to what Mallory brought up, with never really having the discussion about what the need is, the legislature was considering, it didn't go forward, but kickback for adult cultivation. So we never as a town even considered one medical or marijuana growth at all, let alone the differentiation between adult and medical and what that means. One, we have to opt in to being adult use, but there might be a financial incentive next session coming back to municipalities, which would be a good point to solicit some public feedback on as far as in the context of what does our town need, what serves us. So I find that to be a very interesting point as well, as far as thinking about what serves South Berwick.
As far as it being zoned or categorized as agriculture, didn't we also discover that that's really just for hemp and not necessarily for marijuana as a whole? Or
Our lawyer consistently told us that, yes, right now with what the state says and what our ordinance says, that's why we needed the moratorium. It was absolutely necessary to stop growth from happening legally in all zones. So I was satisfied with Phil's answer repeatedly to that. I mean, we hit a pretty, from like all different kinds of angles, trying to make sure that we actually had to do this. And that was his advice.
Yeah, I agree with that. I apologize. I sort of forgot, I guess, at that point with Phil, but I think that certainly is something that obviously we need to address. But I'm still sort of I'm very much questioning, do we need a massive marijuana growth facility, adult or medical, in South Berwick when there's one all over the place? And there's one in pretty much every neighboring town. And, if I think about what we've heard from the public, it's been consistently opposition. And I can't discount that fact. And so I feel like, if we clearly define medical cultivation facility, an adult cultivation facility in our ordinance, and then specifically say that use is not allowed, as long as we're defining it on a larger scale, is that not something that we could do?
In my view, we're being confronted by a very similar situation. That we took a similar approach to in 140-67, adult business establishments. The point in time where adult businesses could exist anywhere in town, and our out for that was to zone it as a specific use. And then we decided to put that into the I-1 zone as well. So it wouldn't be around the schools, in the neighborhoods, and basically it's off by itself if anyone chose to do it, because we couldn't prohibit it. There was some other legal background on that, and I'm seeing the same thing. I believe that it's incumbent upon the town to act on this, or else the donut hole that exists with caregivers and registered caregivers, there's a distinction between the two, could happen anywhere, anyhow, and the same with cultivation. And the onerous aspects of cultivation could in fact go on in any neighborhood in town. That's why we're thinking about licensing registered caregivers and regulating that use locally, because it's it could be a problem in our neighborhoods. And I'm here to support the zoning, and I'm here to support the status quo of what we have for quality of life. And this could be a game changer all over town. So kind of, offering that as the rationale.
I would like to add one thing if I could.
Yeah, sure.
If we are gonna put in an ordinance before this moratorium expires, then Barbara will need to have that by Monday, August 2nd, to be able to post the hearing, to have it in time, to have the joint public hearing for the August 17th, which is only 3 days before it expires. So I just want to make sure we're all thinking about those dates.
Yeah, as we move ahead here and we have a question as to whether or not we should move ahead or not, I think that'll be resolved, and if we do decide to move ahead, there will be language available. Referring back to my March 12, 2021 letter to, it was a memo to Bill Straub, Southborough Planning Board Chair, and I won't go through all the history. Other than the fact that on March 5th, the planning board requested, what we request is a more formal written communication from the council that explains the request of the planning board, rationale for the need of the ordinance, the circumstances that surround this, the schedule. If that can also explain town council's involvement, council SEL, lawyer, involvement, recommendation for action, that would be great. So I went through the history and of where we are overall, like the survey and all the other things. On the second page, I'll quote this. Development of zoning standards are an important consideration. Limiting any stores to the business industrial zones to minimize impacts on residences. The ad hoc committee found benefit to patients and caregivers who would have a regulated and visible way to distribute and receive their medication. That's for stores. Expanded marijuana facility development and prevailing agriculture definitions remain problematic. Chapter 140, zoning section 140-9, and prohibition on the face of existing language perhaps would not stand up in a court challenge. That's from Phil, our lawyer. With conjecture, marijuana cultivation is allowed as a permitted use anywhere agriculture is permitted. The town council and staff sees the need to clarify and further insulate sections of town not in I-1 from potential onerous land use all over town. The draft ordinance is an opportunity to restrict medical marijuana cultivation to a specific zone with appropriate performance standards. See the town's approach to adult business establishments, chapter 140, section 140-67. So that's, I think that kind of addresses what you're. If there are no other general comments, what I'd like to do at this time would be to, there's a little bit of a change in format and language from what we received last December, which was a submittal from Perry to us based on a memorandum from David Galbraith to the group that put this together. Just as it's different, and it's still basically, it's 5 pages. And there are some recommendations on the planning board's recommendation to us, some added language in the definitions and a clarification on 5,000 square foot of cultivation area. There is some other things in the planning board's recommended language that I think need clarification. We can go through if you wish to do that. And otherwise, it was just simply formatting changes from what we received December 22nd, 2020, and then what's been prepared for us by July 13th.
Just to come back to the moratorium topic, so I'm just reading through our moratorium language. And where did we get this number of 3? That a moratorium can only be renewed 3 times? Because this says that state law requires a moratorium to be of a definite term, not more than 180 days, which may be extended for additional 180-day periods upon finding that the problem giving rise to the need for a moratorium still exists and reasonable progress is being made. It says nowhere that it can only happen so many times. And I feel like we can make the case that, you know, the planning board has been making progress on this. We've been discussing it, perhaps maybe not as efficiently as we all might have liked, but I'm just not really comfortable with us, you know, sort of finally having this conversation like 2 weeks before we potentially have to enact this ordinance. And so I'm really curious, not that I want to push it out longer, but like, I also feel like we're sort of being faced with this really big decision. And to Abby's point, the whole tour thing, you know, it just feels like we're trying to do a lot in such a short period of time. And if we were to potentially make changes to the draft language that we already have, we have to have that by Monday, like, that's not gonna happen.
Well, the changes going through it aren't substantive that I have, 'cause I went through them both.
The definitions change is because that, as far as individual liberty, we may look at that, in the 140-9 definition section. And it has 2 different asterisks, and I listened to the planning board meetings on this, and they discussed it quite heavily. Whether a grow facility would be defined by 2 or more caregivers or 3 or more caregivers. So I heard the varying sides on that a number of times. And this was an issue in particular that Kittery had to separate in effect between looking at small caregiver operations like the mom and pop more local ones versus the larger conglomerate. And they decided that they couldn't treat them both the same. So they created 2 different ordinances to regulate them. That might be a good idea. Again, I think we're all coming at this from a very minimal knowledge baseline. I agree with Mallory that this seems a bit rushed. And if we're not legally precluded from extending the moratorium, I would be in favor of that, just on the basis of us fact finding a little bit more and getting a little bit more knowledge of what cultivation is, what that physically looks like. I'm the kind of person that really like to see something and get a better idea once I've, you know, really gotten to check something out rather than just reading about it on a paper. So if we're not allowed to extend the moratorium, I would be in favor, just from the basis of making good policy on extending it.
Title 30A subsection 4355 on moratoriums. Moratorium must be a definite term of not more than 180 days. The moratorium may be extended for an additional 180 days if the municipality adopting the moratorium finds that the problem giving rise to the need for the moratorium still exists, or reasonable progress is being made to alleviate the problem giving rise to the need for the moratorium. It pretty much sunsets a main state law, and I can't find anywhere else right now on an additional 180, and it doesn't go any farther than that.
But see, I sort of read that, I interpret that as like, that sort of like resets as like at each, like it's not like putting on my lawyer hat, like could interpret that, I feel like, to mean multiple moratoria. And I mean, if that's the case, then we're already in trouble. If your interpretation is the case, then we're already in trouble because we've extended it now 3 times.
Well, you get out to extension by selectmen, and this might play into what you're asking. I can't speak tonight. In municipalities where the municipal legislative body is a town meeting, the selectmen may extend the moratorium in compliance with subsection 2, which is what we just went through, after notice and hearing. So that
We're
almost
not a
gives you
select board.
I think it's the same for
selectmen, town council,
coming from the state law.
tomatoes. It's a town manager form of,
Yeah,
right? The
So-
town meeting.
Well, let's warn you this. With the select board, the selectmen are not the legislative body. The town meeting is. We are the legislative body in this town,
So going by that, we can extend it as many times as we want. I mean, that's,
if we're not prepared to move ahead on this, then we have other business to talk about.
I just want to take the steps then of making sure that tour, which I think would be helpful for us on the planning board. And Jack, I want to understand fully what you meant with there's more than 2 of us and proper notification so that we wouldn't be in violation of anything in that fact finding.
3 counselors, it constitutes a meeting. We've been, no matter where we go,
Can't drive to Augusta.
right, we can't be together, the 3 of us, or it constitutes a meeting.
So how
Yeah,
do
we
we,
just have to post it. I think, let's do this. let's
Yeah.
check
Yeah,
with
I
Phil
think
and see if our
Well,
interpretation.
if you're not gonna go, I don't need to go. Keegan's not gonna go, so it's only Jack and Abby
So
anyway,
March next.
so you don't have
You
to
don't
post
wanna,
it.
you don't wanna go? You feel,
I'm good.
you feel too overwhelmed with all the information that you already have on the,
No, I'm fine.
you're
I can
good
go
on it.
visit one whenever I'd like to.
Okay.
I'm good. I don't need to walk through.
Jack,
I've talked to the largest medical marijuana dispensary owner in the state of Maine. I've had my questions
okay.
answered.
If
Alright.
Jack's not going, I'll meet you there and I'll walk through with you, so you're
Well,
not
I'm
going by
wondering
yourself.
if you and I and the planning board want to, I was gonna ask for next Tuesday, just keeping with the Tuesday theme, but. if-
I drive by it twice a day, let me know.
I'll ask.
Um,
And would that be a problem with inviting the planning board?
There's more than 3 of them, then they're having a meeting.
Yes,
Same rules, only 2 of them could go.
unless we post it. I'm trying to think of like a way to have this the most transparent and public should be.
So, like, I would be interested in going on a tour. Next Tuesday. It
Doesn't
just-
work for
it
you.
Simply doesn't work. So what I was sort of trying to suggest was if we feel like we're interpreting the law on the moratorium thing correctly, I would like to confirm with Phil. I mean, I feel like we're checking those 2 boxes, A and B, of the problem giving rise to the need for moratorium still exists because the law hasn't changed. We're still sort of in this same situation. And then I think we have been making reasonable reasonable is a good word, reasonable progress on this. So if we are able to extend the moratorium again, I know I hate to do that and drag this out, but I feel like I personally just don't, I feel like this feels rushed to me, and I think that we need to, if we were to be able to extend the moratorium, I feel like we really need to hold ourselves accountable to doing the tour, to getting the information, to checking all of the boxes, so at the end of this next one, we are good to go. That's what my preference would be, and then we could schedule a tour perhaps a little bit further out,
Okay,
you know, giving everyone a little bit more notice. We
Okay.
can post it accordingly.
all right, so I won't ask him about this too.
But I think.
Yeah.
That's sort of dependent upon the moratorium extension.
Because when we discussed, you know, caregiver retail stores, we had the opportunity to work one-on-one and ask direct questions with caregivers. We had a lot of turnout, a lot of public involvement. It doesn't feel like that same informational exchange, so,
So drop dead is August 2nd, right?
well, that's
Yes,
what we're.
because of the posting, because you have to do it joint, because the public hearing didn't do, the public planning board didn't do theirs.
Right, so we need to get an answer from Phil.
It's now,
Right, realistically, it's now.
yeah, so if we don't go ahead, then we should really strongly, I think the next thing we would do is draft a moratorium and schedule a public hearing for that on the council end, because we don't need as much time to do that at our next meeting, because then we're within the limits of the second or the first extension of the moratorium.
I'm sorry, Jack, you meant draft a moratorium as in draft,
We need another moratorium.
okay, you meant draft an additional,
Well, no,
draft an
we need-
extension of a moratorium.
We need a third moratorium, so that's a different document
Mhm.
than we have right now. So we need to do that. And that's a Phil thing. We go ahead with that, then we need to schedule a public hearing, and then we need to adopt that on August 10th. Yeah. Yeah, August 10th.
I mean, besides Mallory's points of us having a better fundamental basis of understanding and also a public input of what the need is for our town, I don't see this as a highly controversial document. What the planning board went through and you know, mulled over and gave us their ideas. The only point really that I see that we need to discuss, again, based on Kittery's experience of that small operation versus that large industrial type, is that definition section of do we make it 2 or more, 3 or more registered caregivers? I see that really as the only thing, because what they put in here was exactly reflective of what we had consensus on, as far as Should we expand the buffers? Should we expand the buffer between stores? How about the geographical location from the schools? Those were all, the planning board listened to us and they put that all in this document. The only point that they themselves could come to agreement on was that 2 or 3 registered caregivers for one household. So it's not like we have a huge place to go. This is a really good, I think, position to be in as far as the work that they've done, and we all seem to kind of be on the same page. So that's helpful. We don't have a huge disconnect this time.
Another
No,
just
we're- yeah.
point I feel like to help support kind of this pivot is, you know, Jackie brought up the licensing topic, and we have talked about that, and like, there's no moratorium really for us on licensing. That's just something that we need to decide, and we need to decide. And so if we are able to put a moratorium in place on this, then we can focus on what we want to do for licensing, and is that going to include licensing a medical cultivation facility or a marijuana business or whatever.
I gotta say that I'm disappointed by this term, because I view this as a way of getting some of the children off the street. We take care of this, put it aside, and to your point, Abby, the note about 2 or 3 caregivers is suggestive. It's not what was on the December 17th
Correct.
language.
That's it. Yep.
It's brand new, and it's not required.
Correct.
You know, we can, I guess if you want to investigate how many, I guess we can go with that. And also the second note, which was to come up with a building size. It seems like I'm more liberal when it comes to these sorts of things, and I say if a building fits the zoning and it meets all the performance standards for a building on a lot, then it can be whatever that building can be. I see 5,000 as being arbitrary, and it's just I don't know if it's defensible if we're challenged on it. So I think that might be a bridge too far. But again, to the planning board's credit, the final size should be discussed and finalized at the suggested joint public hearing. So by killing this right now, we set ourselves back. And like I said, there's not that much difference between what was proposed to us on December 17th, 2020, and what we have back from the planning board. So but if we're not prepared to discuss it, we're not prepared to discuss it. There are some things I would like to, there are nuances, and it has with respect to the law and how it treats caregivers versus registered caregivers. A caregiver can be someone living in a home, providing medical marijuana for someone who lives in the house. Registered caregiver are the people we're talking about with these facilities. And we need to clarify that with respect to some of this language. If we go to page 2, subparagraph 3, there's some language in here that it says, second line goes, the town until proof that a use/operator is an active registered medical marijuana cultivator. Brings in a whole new term. I believe that should be caregiver. And going down into the 4th line, all that 3rd line, then following on to the 4th line. All applications for local licensing and or annual renewal should include proof that the state caregiver, I'm suggesting we insert caregiver registration and delete licensing, is up to date and effective through the local annual licensing issuance. And going on to the last sentence, local licensing as required will only be issued for the duration of the annual registration issuance, and delete license. That's my sensibility looking at the law, that in fact we're talking about having someone who would potentially operate these facilities be a registered medical marijuana caregiver. That's a prerequisite, and that follows through with other portions of this text.
I think one thing for me, Jack, that I think it to me is missing, so is really the licensing piece, so that the ordinance for the planning board says applicable licensing, permitting, inspection fees as adopted and amended by the town council should be paid by the operator annually or as established by the town council. We haven't established anything. We haven't established any licensing at all for any marijuana businesses. So we're talking about enacting an ordinance referring to a process that we have yet to define.
Correct, but that determination does not preclude us from getting out of the moratorium. We didn't go into the moratorium because we didn't have established licensing fees. So Jack had said earlier that.
So you're
Just-
saying, sorry, you're saying that the licensing issue isn't enough for us to extend the moratorium?
Correct, I would think so, because it doesn't fall under emergency, the emergency statute that we needed to justify having a moratorium in the first place. We had to meet certain criteria to move into a moratorium. And the
Yeah, but
licensing
like-
fee was not one of them, it was.
Just
creating a
reading this,
geographic-
the problem giving rise to the need for a moratorium still exists and reasonable progress is being made to alleviate the problem giving rise to the need for the moratorium. Like, that's what the law says. I think it's worth posing the question to Phil of, even if it's just the licensing topic, I mean, that's something that we would like to as a town to, I think, enact some sort of licensing. I don't know what that looks like. And we're talking about publishing an ordinance that's referring to licensing that doesn't yet exist. So to me, we can't enact an ordinance that's talking about licensing that we have not defined.
It's a different form of, we're talking about licensing registered caregivers at large.
So
That's what
the
doesn't exist.
planning board, I think, is recommending, sorry, I'm just reading the memo. It's a mess.
Well, there's a whole bunch of stuff in there.
Yeah, yeah.
That's why I said that,
They're
that we
saying-
should jump down to page 2, section 3, which is the medical marijuana cultivation facility ordinance.
Yep.
Jump down to the next section where there's subparagraph 1, the joint council public hearing.
Yep.
And then local
Number 2.
marijuana licensing. I mean, that's another thing, so.
Yep.
So this memo is gonna be alive for at least several meetings.
Oh, absolutely, like, exactly.
Because it takes a shotgun approach to everything. It's a summary memo for all the things that the planning was considering.
Yes, and so what I'm saying is that the planning board is recommending that the council implement broader local regulation or licensing of all marijuana operations and businesses, not just caregivers. They're recommending, they say, including caregivers, caregiver cultivation, medical storefronts, medical cultivators, et cetera. To me, that's sort of everything. So we as the council are responsible for determining what we want to do for licensing, and we haven't done that.
Well, with all due respect to the planning board, I say thank you very much. The town council shall create our own agenda with respect to these things.
Agreed.
If the town council wants to take something essentially out of order
Mhm.
and talk about licensing first, well, that's how we have to decide it. I think we should, there's a specific need for this right now, and I think we should take care of it.
I agree.
And then move on to other topics and at a schedule that makes sense for us. And we take the planning board's advice and counsel seriously, and but I don't think we can get it done, because I think we kind of wander on the axle a little bit right now as far as talking about all these things. So that's why I wanted to kind of focus on the I-1 cultivation facilities. That seemed to make sense to me in terms
Yeah.
of not getting confused.
Just the last point I'll make on this, I think my stance is clear. This ordinance that we're talking about potentially, given the timeline we're under, we're talking about potentially enacting it within the next few weeks. I think it's reasonable to think that immediately upon this ordinance being enacted, we'll have an application. And at that point, we won't have a licensing process in place and boxes to check to make sure that, we're comfortable with how that business is going to operate, because we've not yet defined the licensing process.
Yeah, we had discussed this, I believe, last minute. Jen, did you get like a median of licensing fees for cultivation
Last night.
last meeting?
Okay.
For me, like, the licensing thing is really not so much fees, it's more so the process that goes along with it. And the checks that are completed, and I sent to everyone a couple of weeks ago, an example of, forgive me, I can't remember, it was Turner or Wyndham, I think Wyndham was the primary of an example of a licensing ordinance that I think we could pretty easily kind of lift and shift into South Berwick. And I just have concerns about enacting an ordinance referring to a licensing process that we haven't defined.
And I did send everybody from Elliott and from Berwick. And the gentleman from Berwick was very responsive and wanted to help with me.
Good.
I don't have those numbers right in front of me.
Okay.
Sorry.
Because in doing that, Mallory, the only thing that Phil or council suggested was that we, set a fair rate.
Yeah.
For services rendered.
Yeah, to me, it's not a revenue
Right.
Opportunity. it's a
Mhm.
process.
I think you're confusing what's listed here as licensing, which in fact this ordinance does create a license. It creates a license for these facilities. And the licensing that we're considering for all registered marijuana caregivers. That's open, but I think that's confusing the licensing topic. Because this in fact does start the wheels rolling.
Yeah.
To create the license specifically for this land use.
So I think, my opinion on licensing for marijuana was that we should license marijuana businesses. So that would include any business, any person that is doing anything related to marijuana. So this would include all of the uses. I think that's maybe where the confusion is, and if we don't have consensus that we all would like to license a cultivation facility as a council and have there be a step in which that facility would have to gain council approval. That is, just take a step back. That is what I would like to see us do, is to implement a licensing process where all marijuana businesses, there is a process in which they need to obtain a license and gain approval from the council or potentially from the town clerk. The Wyndham ordinance that I sent out to everyone, I think the smaller caregiver operations, the steps were a little bit not quite as extensive. It didn't require council approval. So perhaps that's a better question to ask, is do we have consensus that do we want as a council to issue a license to a medical or adult, any type of cultivation facility on this scale? If that is something that we as a council don't agree that we all want to do, then I'll stop talking. But that's, I think, what we haven't defined. And if all we're gonna do is talk about the license that's sort of ginned up as part of this ordinance, that's sort of issued more or less like by the planning board, then I guess we're fine. I'm talking more about the kind of higher level license.
So the state issues a license in order for you to be a
Mhm.
marijuana cultivator anyway, based on tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, depending on square footage of marijuana. So they're already licensed through the state. They've already had that. Now, if we choose to license them, we can, but we could go through with what Jack's proposing and Abby in going through with the moratorium, understanding that anybody that applied to the town to grow has already got a license from the state of Maine. So they've already been checked. So it's not like we're gonna, I mean, we can, again, do it after the fact, but they've already been approved by the state of Maine to grow before they would put an application in with us. So they've already been through that background process before they can even do it. So we can feel good in that fact of, if somebody, like you said, I agree with you, Mallory, as soon as this goes in, we're probably gonna see an application.
Yep.
We see that application, pretty good that that gentleman's already licensed in the state of Maine, according to this.
And what the license that I'm sort of proposing, the process that really enacts is the annual renewal process. For us to be given an opportunity to, just like we do for liquor stores, which we've discussed 1,000 times, is more of a formality, but we could write language that makes that a requirement annually for there to be a check and for us to renew their license.
I have a question for Phil on that, just with regards to what happened in the legislature with them moving some of that municipal check. So that, it was gonna be that the municipalities were gonna be kicked back automatically, like liquor license, all of the medical marijuana caregivers, that we had to also subsequently approve their licensure as well as the state, and that got extinct. So I wonder if we wanna ask Phil if that extended also into medical marijuana growing.
So, I'm pulling up the response we got back from Phil on June 10th. I specifically asked the question. We discussed implementing an annual municipal license renewal process. For example, each year the store does not get approval. Each year, if the store does not get approval to have their license renewed, then they would no longer be able to operate. And I asked specifically, is there language that we can incorporate to do this? And he said, yes.
Okay.
The proposed licensing ordinance should have a provision that states, quote, "No person may establish, operate, or maintain a medical marijuana retail store," and we could swap that out with a marijuana business if we wanted to. This
Okay.
isn't just specific to a store without a license from the council. It can include a period of time for existing uses. The long and short of it is yes, we
Okay.
can do what I am proposing. And
Okay,
clearly you guys know where I'm at on this.
And Jack, the main state license feeds into what you said about the building fitting the lot. In part of if the building fits where they want to build it, let them build whatever size building they want, is earlier the conversation.
Yeah.
So a tier 1 license is 500 square feet, a tier 2 is 2,000, tier 3 is 7,000, tier 4 is 20, up to 20,000.
the tiers are
So-
adult use.
No.
Just so you know.
Nope, correct. But that ties into what you're talking about how big of a building. So,
I'd like to speak to it's paragraph 17, the proposed ordinance. Fees, applicable licensing, permitting, inspection fees is adopted and amended by the town council should be paid by the operator annually or established by the town council. So there's an annual renewal right in there.
Yeah, but where have we defined that? We haven't defined anywhere the fee schedule, what is required. This is just a big,
Those
big.
are details that need to be worked out.
That's what I'm saying. And so we're talking about enacting an ordinance that's referring to details that we haven't
That don't
worked out.
exist.
That is my whole
Well,
point.
let's do it.
Can we do it by,
We
The-
need,
by
we
in
need
2
some,
weeks?
we need
Yeah.
some data to base
Right
it
in.
off of, a median
We'll
from
vote on it.
surrounding towns. A fair
What do you
number.
think we
Okay,
are
so then
here?
I
We can-
propose-
We can make any law we want.
okay, then I propose we take Wyndham and we control find South Berwick. And we replace
That-
Wyndham with
that's-
South Berwick.
Well, Wyndham combined,
That-
But realistically, what can we
Wyndham
implement
combined
in
is
2
only
weeks?
No,
medical
no,
into
what we're
one.
talking
So
about
that's
is,
probably-
is cultivation facilities only right now.
yes.
You want all of Wyndham and all the things they do, which I'm not prepared to discuss.
Okay.
In all of its factors, but I am prepared to discuss this tonight. I spent a bunch of time on this, and I've looked at it, and I think that the changes that are proposed by the planning board don't, other than formatting, because I had a little, certain sections became other sections, but all the words are in there.
They're quite rational, they're quite
Yeah, no.
reasonable.
To be clear,
No,
Yeah.
just the numbers.
Mhm.
you just don't want to enact it without having something for licensing.
yes, to be clear, I have no issue with anything that is included in the
You
ordinance.
don't think that could be done at the public hearing?
Licensing.
For us to sort out a licensing, we've been talking about this topic for 2 years. You think we're gonna pull together a licensing process in 2 weeks?
We can bet on.
Well,
Like,
if
I have a lot of faith in us, but I don't think that's, I don't think we can pull that off.
In all honesty, the licensing should be short and sweet. There isn't much to it, in all honesty. They're gonna come before the board. We'll check with the police department, see if there's been any issues. We can check with the state of Maine to see if Maine has done any drive-bys with them to see if there's any issues. And if there's no issues with them and there's no complaints from the neighbors, then pass, set, give us your check, go back to work. Realistically, it's that simple.
But how much is the check for? That's what Mallory wants
We have both surrounding towns.
to. Okay,
Yeah, we pick a number from there and we go. nobody's gonna balk at what they're paying, right? No one's,
Yeah,
no
no,
one's gonna complain at what they're paying. I don't, we had this talk with the planning board when we did the joint session. I'm not here to make the town of South Berwick money.
Correct.
So if we figure $1,500 or whatever we figured, that's great. It covers costs, covers
Right,
the clerk's cost, the police department's cost, covers whoever's cost we have to look into this. Good to go, ship it.
I agree.
It's a business in town, paying taxes, employing people.
Well, our friends in Turner say that under license fees and costs, the initial fees for medical marijuana establishment, which is a whole other different terminology, shall be $100, whatever that is. That's what I see from Turner. From Wyndham. Where we go from Wyndham? They have all different categories, medical marijuana caregiver, medical marijuana caregiver, home occupation license applications. Let's see if they can find, cultivation.
You're looking at
They talk about term 1 year. Got the number of them. They talk about stores, retail stores, adult use marijuana stores, which we don't want. I'm not seeing anything in Wyndham that is dealing with cultivation.
So.
I mean, I'm going through this kind of quick. I'm not a speed reader, but-
So Wyndham defines a marijuana business as pretty much everything, all the different possibilities. It's what's considered to be a marijuana business. And,
Yeah, we don't want to do that though.
just hold on. And they say under the license requirements section, a marijuana business, which is that umbrella of everything, shall not begin or continue operations unless it is received and is in possession of a license issued pursuant to this ordinance. Marijuana businesses that hold an approved land use permit, that's all zoning things. And then there's an entire section devoted specifically to, which really I think is the bigger issue, is renewal, because there's no renewal process captured in our current ordinance from the plan, in the zoning ordinance. It's just the initial license. So I guess what I would like to see us do is implement a renewal process where there's some type of an annual review.
Requires an annual, annual thing under 17.
Okay. But again, we haven't
I'm
defined.
saying that if they're gonna pay a fee annually, I think that constitutes a renewal.
State of Maine licensing is based on your square footage or non-medical, but cultivation is based on square footage. Tier 1 is no more than 500 for indoor. Tier 4 is no more than 30,000 for indoor. It's about $17 a plant is what they figure out, but so they charge you by the square footage, so it's all over the map on what you want to charge.
That's how it's already counted during it as well. It's tiered.
It's tiered based on square footage of the
Square
building.
footage and how many people are.
And
Yep.
they're issuing municipal licenses, like at the town level licenses.
That's my understanding.
So like they have to do the state process, but then in order to have an operation here, there's an additional step in
Yes.
which they have to do the license. That is what I want us to implement, and I want it to not just be paying a fee. There
Well,
needs
for
to be
annual-
other processes and checks in place, besides just paying money.
Like what?
Like the many, like let me pull up Wyndham, I'm sorry, I'm not,
And the only reason I'm saying that, Mallory,
Would
is
you like a hard copy of it?
I know I've got it right here.
I don't want to repeat what the state of Maine's already doing to them. State of Maine's already doing a background check, so why do we need to repeat that process? That's where I'm going with this. State of Maine's already doing a police check, DEA check, whatever. They're already doing that to renew. Why are we gonna,
But that's not included in your job.
I'm just saying, Jack, I want to know what Mallory wants to put into the licensing piece, because the state of Maine is already doing all that. What do we want to do at a local level? I don't want to,
Double background
back
check
or
them.
reinvent the
I
wheel.
hear you on that.
Yeah, and we address that in here because we say that the cultivation facilities, Paul, shall meet all operating and other requirements of state and local law and regulation. To the extent the state of Maine has adopted or adopts any future stricter law, regulation, or rule governing medical marijuana, then the standards, the stricter law, regulation, or rule shall control.
So we do a local check like we do with, when we renew a liquor license.
Yeah, like
License.
that,
So
That's sort of
basically,
what
it's
I'm
check in
wondering.
with the police chief.
Exactly. It gives us a public forum to annually check in and see how everyone's doing. There been any issues?
so. Like just some specific things around, things that would potentially involve like a denial of a license. Has had a license for the marijuana business revoked by the town or the state, for example, and just providing proof that annually that they still have a license from a state perspective. Is in violation of any other ordinance or has unpaid penalties assessed by a court related to marijuana business. Has not acquired all necessary state and local approvals, fails to meet zoning ordinances, convicted of criminal violation. These types of things that all, if it's a healthy business, shouldn't be an issue for them to provide.
But I wonder if the state's already doing that, and I would think that they would before they're gonna offer another license.
They'd
So
have
to
to.
John's point, if we're gonna be spending municipal dollars and assigning someone to do all of that background check work that the state has already verified.
I go back to, and like you said, we've gone back to it 1,000 times, but I go back to the liquor license. We approved the liquor license based on the chief of police telling us there's no issues. The state of Maine, it's on the state of Maine to approve that liquor license based on any issues they've had, any DWIs, any criminal convictions of the owners of the bar who are on that thing. They do all of that. That's why they pay the fee to the state of Maine, not to the town of South Berwick. So I really don't think we should redo what the state is doing already for these people. If they have any issues with DEA or anybody else, the state of Maine is not gonna issue them a license. We could require, Mallory, proof of their license.
Yeah.
Their renewed license prior to us issuing the town license. We could require that, and that way we know all that's been done. And the letter from the chief that they're in good standing, and then we approve it. It would be that easy with no expense. And then we just charge them whatever we think a licensing fee is.
Do we have anything policy wise in our ordinances with regards to how we handle liquor licenses? Is that spelled out anywhere that the town council shall review? Because I'm wondering, just
We
speaking out loud,
inherit that.
but I didn't know if we could copy and paste it into this procedure since
No,
No.
it's,
just a formality more.
well, I think the reference to a liquor license is fine, but it's really two different things.
No, I was just using that as the example of the state does all the work.
Right.
The state's doing all the work on marijuana.
Yeah.
If we're gonna license them, we check in with Chief LaJoy, make sure they're good, make sure they show us a copy of their brand new license and have a nice
Pay their
day.
fee.
Yeah, but, and I, thank you, I think something like that would, I think is necessary. I mean, do we know for certain that there's a communication loop? Let's say, a business that opens up in South Berwick somehow gets their license revoked. Does the state communicate that to us?
State's gonna shut them down. They're not gonna open. The state will come down and shut them down. We'll see all the DEA cars and all the rest of the stuff. We'll know. Chief LaJoy is gonna know from the state if there's a problem. Because they're gonna go down and shut the business down. Like they do a bar that's serving minors, a store that's selling to minors. Everybody in town knows when that happens.
I would like to ask the council a question. You can nod your heads or whatever, but you don't have to answer. But I'd like to know if the council feels as though there's been a case made about the need for this ordinance. I'd really like to know that, because that would inform me as to how I'm gonna be thinking about this going ahead.
I believe there is based on our ordinances with the agriculture statute. Yes, I believe there is a definite need based on that.
I agree. I didn't want there to be a need as much as I
Well-
tried to not find it. I do agree with our town council on that, yes, there is a need for the ordinance.
If Mallory, if you feel as though there's a need to flesh out some licensing language, I would suggest, and I would go along with you, that you draft something this week. Send it to Jennifer, and we include it as part of the text that we're gonna go towards a public hearing. Because between now and then, we can still keep the thing moving. Or any other piece of this that you think needs to be amended. I don't care, but I'd like to have that language on the table so we can continue and have the joint public hearing. And then at that point, in time, this isn't the decision point.
Right.
This is
Yeah.
to see how we can keep moving ahead, if we
Yeah.
keep moving ahead. And at that point, after the public hearing, we'll fish or cut bait. You know, we'll decide if we move ahead or just continue to wordsmith it.
I'm good with that, so I can
But,
pull,
but stick to these definitions. though.
yes, yeah, so for the scope of the near term, because we have this deadline for cultivation, the licensing language will be focused on specifically cultivation.
That's, I think that's completely appropriate.
And then I would ask that we resume the licensing conversation for other marijuana operations. We can perhaps leave that as unfinished business until we sort it all out, so that it's a topic there for us to
hash
work out. Yes,
Agreed.
is that fair?
Well, I think, and that's a consensus piece that I know that I support. That, further regulation of registered caregivers in our town, whether there's 30 of them or wherever there are. I feel the need for that because I feel the need to support the neighborhoods where people live. And it's, as much as we're proponent of mixed use, I love mixed use, I think it's healthy, but isolated mixing doesn't work, and particularly we have a potentially one in our shoes. So I think that's something we have to keep moving along. Keegan, are you still here? How do you feel about licensing? I'm talking about registered caregivers now.
I think licensing is like the important and kind of make sure I'm jump with this. State's doing a good job. And we should be good. Good for us to kind of. check things.
Don't want to put you on the spot, Abby, but how are you feeling about that topic?
I like moving on to the moratorium. That's our immediate necessity point of action. And then a commitment to continue discussing marijuana business and licensing for all different types of business, I think is important. It's important because we've heard from the public that it's something that could help solve some problems in town. And I think it's important for us to have some clarity on it. But it's not the immediate need for moving out of the moratorium.
Okay.
Got two people with their hands
Yeah,
up,
we've got
got three people with their hands up.
Well, it's with the council right now.
Well, I'm just letting you know.
Yeah, all good. And I believe I asked if anybody had comments before we started discussing this. So, The okay, so I would suggest for moving ahead with language towards a public hearing that that we in 140-9 definitions, we delete the parenthesis no 1 by 2/3 and go back to formal language, which was medical marijuana cultivation / growing facility means a facility used for cultivating, processing, and or storing of medical marijuana by a registered caregiver. And at a location which is not the registered caregiver's primary year-round residence. And I think that's what I would suggest for that language, and then we leave the 5,000 square feet in there as a placeholder. That's suggested by the planning board, and with the acknowledgement that it is a placeholder. It's just a place for discussion.
Right.
The other The other, again, going to note 3, I would suggest that we delete cultivator and write in caregiver. That's something that I already mentioned before. And, the last line, well, put in state caregiver registration, delete licensing, duration of the annual registration issues. After that, I wanted to discuss setbacks. The original document had 500-foot setbacks from private schools. The current draft, well, that's the current draft as well. Comparing to that, they both have 500 straight line. And, going to the very end, on the last page, under 18A, where they talk about occupancy permit. And that's under the overall topic of 18, which is change of ownership. Use of the proposed building, properties, cultivation will continue to be valid for 1 year for the time of operation under the existing cultivator owner. Ceases to the approval of the new owner. I put a parenthesis at the end of that, and I wanted to be clear that the new owner / cultivator has qualifications as described in section 149-69.3, which is which describes their qualifications. Which was the thing I talked about before about inserting registered caregivers. That's all I had.
So going back, Jack, to the definitions, section 140-9, just to understand what your suggestion was, you wanted to strike
I wanted to
different,
go back to the original language that's in the 12/17/2020 definition.
I don't have that one in front of me, so you want to make it so that it doesn't have anything there for residential? Not a residential?
No, all it did was, the planning board's version inserted
Two or,
the two, by 2/3. And.
okay, you would just take that out.
Take that out and
Okay.
just leave the language the way
Yes.
it is.
Yeah, I like that.
And,
What is the language that made it again? Sorry, I don't
right,
have the original.
right. All it does is that, you want to look at them side by
So
side,
you-
they inserted this in red.
Okay. So this is the specifying the number.
Yeah, for the sake of the public, there's a little bit difference in the definition as proposed by the planning board on July 13th and the definition that we had originally back in December 17th of 2020.
And then the 5,000 square feet will be something we discussed.
Yeah, I just, italicize that or, make a note to say that,
I don't know. I honestly, and that was the big question that I heard some planning board members raise, and you said it too. I can't conceptualize 5,000 feet of growing, I don't know what that looks like. And I want,
many people can't, don't feel bad.
okay, but I think that fact finding tour would help us in that, because then we can say, aha, this is what that growth space is, and it would make a lot more sense for me.
Well, I've been through this a few times. I think any prescribed number could be considered arbitrary. You have essentially pulling it out of the air. And I think the safe route is to default to our performance standards for a building on a lot. And if it meets the performance standards for a building on a lot, with all the traffic and all the other things that needs to be reviewed, that will derive a building size.
Okay. It's a new business. So it's a good place to start. Like you said, it's a placeholder. We're not writing in the blood.
Right,
It's,
and if someone has some logic
right.
for a certain size, then
Okay. Very, very green.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. I mean, I go through it all the time. People say, what's an acre? And
Yeah.
so you come up with the thing of saying, well, you know what a football field is.
Yeah.
But about, it's not an acre, but it's about an acre.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Well, it helps you visualize.
100 yards is about an acre.
Okay,
Yes.
so.
Is that not a football? Oh, great.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
It's- do the math.
Yeah.
So we had discussed joint public hearing with planning board on the 17th, followed by a special town council meeting.
Mhm.
And then in order to add any new language to this regarding licensing, we need that by Monday,
If she's gonna
Needs to
post
be
it.
posted on the this week.
by the end of the week.
You agree? Sorry. to interrupt.
No. Especially if we want Phil to look at it. He is on notice that we may have something for him to review.
So I'm available if you want to bounce it.
Okay.
You know, other set of eyeballs.
I will work to get something out by the end of the day tomorrow. And I'm sure Phil should be around.
So, there is a timing problem here. So that if we decide not to move ahead after the public hearing on the 17th, it doesn't leave us enough time to extend the moratorium.
I'm not too concerned about that just because the planning board has sent us a very reasonable schematic here that I think reflects what we've heard from the public and our own thoughts on cultivation on this issue. So I don't see any, this seems like a logical convergence of our thoughts here. I don't see this as high conflict points that we're gonna have to flush out on the 17th.
Okay, take a chance then. Okay, I don't think we need to vote for any of that stuff, do we, Barbara?
If you want to hold a public hearing and or a council meeting, yes, you do.
Okay,
Mr. Chair, motion to hold a joint public hearing with the planning board on August 17th at 6:30 PM.
Second.
would you say 6:30?
Yep.
Okay, everybody understand the motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Then we should just say the
Chair.
intent is the special council
Sorry,
meeting.
Mr. Chair, I move that we have a special council meeting following the town hearing on August 17th.
Second.
Sorry to interrupt.
It's good. Motion is second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that motion passes 5-0. I'm on the board, aye. Okay, moving on. Council meeting remote participation policy, this is the second reading of that. Essentially, it's the same document that was referred to us by MMA. And it allows for us to continue with inviting the public to tune in remotely with the encouragement of planning board town council members to attend unless there's particular reasons that we can't make it. And basically need to talk to the chair, to the chair, presiding officer of the body, in consultation with other members, if appropriate and possible, will make a determination that remote methods of participation are necessary and in a timely manner as possible under the circumstances. So under that, we have latitude. So if you have a special circumstance where you can't attend, you can, we'll apply the same remote meeting protocols. Roll call votes and all the rest of that. But again, we're strongly encouraged to be in person.
Mr. Chair, I move that we accept the council meeting remote participation policy.
If I-
Second.
oh, too late.
Oops. You wanted to add
I
something?
was gonna make a note that you had some hands up, but they are probably from the last discussion.
They were.
I think they were.
So you can take your hands down if it's not for the current item. apparently.
So everybody understand the policy as we move ahead, because we have to have this in place by July 30th. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 And I didn't say aye
Any
either.
any opposed? Not opposed. That motion passes 5-0. Algonquin Road Report, under the supporting documents, the information that was requested by Keegan back in June, I think it was Keegan, right?
I believe so.
So,
Yeah, it's all there. So it's available for anybody who wants to see it. I don't think there's any action required by the council at this time.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Is the most recent kind of take that we have on this property from Phil really from October 2019?
That's what the code enforcement officer has, which is what the request was. That's probably not what Perry has from Phil on the property, but this might be what, and I'm just guessing, but this is probably what Joe has. The request was all of documentation that the code enforcement officer had. So he might not be privy to all the rest of the stuff in the last 2 years that Perry's had. Am I,
Was it the code
Correct.
enforcement officer? I could go back in the minutes and check, or was it the town?
I thought it was the
I
code
think it
enforcement.
was, yeah.
Was
Yeah, I
it?
think
I can look it up, but.
I do have access to Perry's old emails.
But there are lawyer conversations going on here. There are certain things here that are privileged and confidential. And so right now, any correspondence on this is being handled lawyer to lawyer. And not through well, number one, it's not going through the council, and the manager is referring everything to any inquiries and all the rest of that to Bernstein Shore.
We didn't ask if there was anyone who wanted to speak on this topic.
Is there anybody who wants to speak on the information that was in the supporting documents on Algonquin Road?
Jeff?
I can't see the hands.
You
They're
can see
in the
the
top
hands in the
left
upper
page
left-hand
first,
corner.
Yes, you want me to go, Jack? Is that okay?
Yeah, okay, I can see that now, yeah.
I think just around I perused this quickly this afternoon. Doesn't look like there's any information in regards to marijuana sort of happening over there. It's mentioned in time, but there seems to be holes and gaps in the documentation here. Not quite sure why that is. Perry was asked directly, and I just wondering why why your one employee wasn't held accountable. And number two, this would be a great example for what Mallory was just talking about with licensing. Would be able to see the action happening. And I think that just right here just proves the very importance of having licensing. We got to do what's right, not what's easy. So I think it's very important. But again, I think there are holes even in this, and I'm just wondering where we can get any answers if we're coming to our town council and we're just getting stuff and then we're being told you can't share it because there's litigation, yet I'm not seeing anything about our town being sued. I just like some accountability would be great. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I could just make a point of clarification from our town council meeting on June 8th, that is when Keegan gave the official request for inquiry. And that was specifically noted for the code enforcement officer to provide a 10-year chronological timeline. So I wasn't sure if it was town or code enforcement, so we did get what was asked for.
Okay, Craig? You've moved over so I can see the hand now. I just have a problem with the right side.
I just wonder if we're gonna have an opportunity to go back and comment on the marijuana stuff. Yeah.
We've kind of moved on from that. We'll schedule a public hearing and kind of go on.
I think, Greg, what ask at the beginning of the conversation if anyone had comments on the topic we are about to discuss, and I don't think anyone jumped in, so.
Yeah, and topic's not on the agenda, so. All right, that's disappointing. Thank you.
Talking about the medical marijuana retail stores called unfinished business number 1.
Nope, it was the cultivation piece. That you had an hour-long conversation on, which justified the fact that you really should do a moratorium. So if we're not going to hear comments on that, again, disappointing. So I'll back up what Jeff said on the licensing piece. Licensing is critical. It is just one of 2 parts. And the easy way to look at that is the state of.
Talking about 161 Agunquit Road and the information that was provided to the public based on a request for Roberts.
Right, and I'm backing up what Jeff said and adding to it that licensing is important because the state of Maine, OMP, doesn't care about whether or not an individual is going to be a good neighbor. And so the licensing piece gives the town the ability to essentially suspend that operation. You can't necessarily take away the land use after it's been granted. The marijuana in Maine is a right. It is preempted by state law. So unless you do something to control them, you're out of luck. Maine doesn't care if they're a good neighbor. The town should care, and that is the power of a license. You can add additional requirements over and above what the state of Maine does. Who cares about the background check? That is something we should be doing. Yes, the state of Maine does that. But again, at the end of the day, they don't care if they're a good neighbor or not. And again, I'll just voice my disappointment that you're not taking comments on the cultivation piece.
As Mallory said, we asked if anybody had any comments. There were no comments. Okay, Steve, I see.
Hi, good evening. Steve Bays, 160 Ogunquit Road. I live across from this marijuana facility and the caregiver retail store. These are basically the same documents that my attorney's letter submitted to the town in January. I'm disappointed if none of you have had read that yet. Certainly there was back and forth with Perry and the town to try to get a response from that. Please don't continue to say there's communication between the lawyers because there is not. Your town attorney is not responding to any of our questions that have been asked, that have been raised. If you look at these documents, you will see that there is nowhere that municipality approval was given for any of the uses of those outbuildings. The certificates of use and occupancy are not filled out as required by your ordinance. You had a retail store moratorium in place in July 2018. When did this retail store get built? Why are you not responding to the questions? And in your current retail store ordinance, will you require them to comply with any piece of it? Now, it is me and my legal team and my neighbor's lawyer that had to prove to you from the Office of Marijuana Policy that it is a licensed caregiver retail store because we could not get the council or the town manager or the town attorney to respond and acknowledge that. And the previous manager has misled people that there's ongoing litigation. So I'm just frustrated. We keep getting the runaround and, it's just discouraging. So it's exhausting. You're just lying to us. So please stop. And if if you feel strongly that this use is allowed on a 160 Ogunquit Road for the retail store, please just have your town attorney write a couple sentences on it is approved based on whatever and send it off and we'll be done with this. But I don't think your town attorney will libel himself by writing such a document. Thank you.
Mary Ann,
Good evening, and thank you, Marianne Minard, Beach Road. I guess I'm feeling such a profound disappointment tonight, and what I'm hearing and what I've seen tonight disturbs me greatly, because I don't think that you have consensus on the council truly about the direction for many initiatives regarding marijuana. I think you're down in the weeds trying to make these very small adjustments without taking the 40,000 foot view, which you all need to do as a council. You need to grapple with, what is this meaning for our community? What are the impacts on our community? What happens in cases like Steve's neighbor? And then what message are we sending to every other person who wants to happen to become a retail store? Nothing happens in our town without that regulation, without that local licensing, without those strong performance standards. And I think, and you know, I've attended a lot of meetings and I've managed to stay polite despite some pretty lousy treatment from some people. However, tonight I'm sick. I am sick when you will not even consider extending that moratorium. We have all the legal papers that says, yes, you can. I sent casework. I sent supporting documents from the Maine Law Library. You have the right to extend that moratorium. Do it. Do it. And then take the time to grapple, to fight this thing out, to get true public opinion. Because if you've so assumed that this is going to pass for this cultivation, that, well, it doesn't matter what the public hearing says, it's tight enough, it'll go. You don't know that. And for the first time, I am angry beyond belief.
anybody else want to talk about the information that's provided in the supporting documents on 161 Ogunquit Road as requested by the town councilor? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to parks and playground signage. We have verification on what Councilor James interpretation of the state law that's verified by the town attorney. And had a conversation with Jennifer about this, and I think the best thing to do, the sign's down. I think we just leave it down.
We do, and there's actually one more. Whilst I was driving out about town,
Okay,
there's apparently a park on Emery's Bridge Road, past Hooper Sands on the left as you're going down the hill. Says you can't be there after dusk, right when you go over the creek. There's a park right there. There's one of those signs in that park.
Where is this now?
Hooper Sands, I'm going down Hooper, Emery's Bridge, drive by Hooper Sands, heading out towards
Past the
Tatnag.
marsh.
Yep, go down the hill, past the marsh, brown houses on your right, there's a culvert.
Yeah.
There's a park right there.
Huh.
In that park is that sign
Where is this now?
on Hooper Sands Road, I mean, on
No.
Emery's Bridge Road.
Is it past Mountain Road?
Exact same sign with,
Exact same time,
interesting.
faded, but exact same time.
We can take that one. I'm fine with taking that one. as well.
Yeah, oh no, they did a fantastic job. It was down, everything's
Okay.
good. The hubbub died down. We can work on that ordinance. We can put that into our things to do.
Yeah. Okay. I forgot to ask if the public had any comment on our
For you, I'll go back out tomorrow.
apparently flawed recreation and parks ordinance. Okay, so I think it's clear, we're gonna just take the signs down and
Yes.
avoid the problems with
Even easier than bagging it.
We never
Yes.
badged it, he just took
I
it.
saw that was,
Yeah, he thought that was the cleaner
Yeah.
way to do
Of
it.
the
Very
two
much so.
bolts to take it down was fantastic.
Right, exactly. I'll have him take down that side as well.
okay.
Thank you, man.
Okay,
I started yesterday. right?
move on to new business. Item number 1, possible action on zoning ordinance amendment 120-26. Members of the public, any comment on that? Hearing none. What's the wish of the council? On the sign ordinance, what's the discussion?
I spoke my piece earlier, Jack. I think it's a travesty of justice if we do not help those businesses out there. I understand the planning board's piece. Again, I respect them for all the hard work they do, but I can't see not supporting the businesses we have in a business park.
Well, there's a clarification I'd like to make, and that is, it's my understanding now that the proposed sign is not gonna be in the new improved Punkintown Road. I think
Correct.
that there was a comment made earlier, that it was gonna be, you know, there's two signs, there's the place sign of Punkintown Road, industrial park, whatever that says. And then this is a second sign that's going to be proposed, or this ordinance would allow a sign to be erected in a designated location as prescribed by permissions granted by Central Maine Power Company and in a location approved by NDOT. So I just wanted that as a clarification. Under section F, I've had problems, and I mentioned it before about this, and it's under F3. The existing language is two-sided signs must reflect mirror images and not exceed 100 square feet per side. I have a problem with reflect mirror. I'm not sure that is exactly what we need to say. I think what we need to say is that we need to say the two-sided signs must show the same text and images, both sides. But I think reflect mirror images is like,
It could be backwards.
Correct.
that's kind of what I was thinking, but I actually looked in the mirror and I'm not backwards, so.
Right,
Depends which mirror you look at.
Must be identical?
yeah,
Yeah,
identical, that's,
sides must be identical.
Yeah.
Opposing sides must be
That's right.
identical.
So it's we delete reflect mirror and, okay, I'll take my thing out and must
be identical.
be
images.
identical.
Yeah.
Okay, that's even better. But the bigger piece here is whether or not we have the will of the council to move ahead with the proposed amendments.
Yeah, I'm not sure, I mean, the planning board's been pretty vocal and that they're not really for this. I think it would be important to listen to them. I do understand that we really need to promote the businesses there. We did spend a lot of money on the road, but we also don't want to create a precedent. We don't want to go against state law and things like that. So I think, me personally, I think we should look for other options. There has to be something. But that's just my personal take on it.
We don't presently have a town planner. We contract that out with David Galbraith, and I do take that very seriously that our paid consultant thinks that this new ordinance change might constitute something that violates state law, as it might be a billboard. So I want to, before I give this a green light, if the person we pay to give us advice is saying that they think that this is in violation, and not alone, but our volunteer planning board also unanimously came to our meeting to tell us their discomfort from it. It makes me want to take a little bit more time on this in tandem with maybe checking in again with our code enforcement officer to see their insight.
Our code enforcement officer's been pretty clear. And I'll be pretty clear. Our code enforcement officer needs to be a little more business friendly if we want to build this town. We're in 2021, not 1978. We have to do something. The more time we wait, the more time we're gonna lose businesses the way we are right now. I don't want to rush this. I don't want to put something in. But we've been looking at this for well north of a year. We have to tell the business owners something. And I don't want to keep going, give us 2 more weeks, give us 2 more weeks, give us 2 more weeks. That's all we've been doing for well over a year. Again, I feel bad that I okayed spending $1 million of this town's money to build a road. Can't advertise, it's on the road. We knew we were putting up a sign when we built that road. We all signed on to that. $1 million.
And I apologize to the business community there that it took so long for us to get draft ordinance language for us to even consider. You know, we had been asking for that for over a year. Could we get the weigh-in from DOT just on the legality, or if Phil can even offer us his counsel on that, of if what we're proposing here constitutes a billboard, which is restricted by,
DOT gave their blessing for the sign.
Right.
I thought just CMP gave blessing for location.
We have CMP and DOT.
And
but-
DOT.
And
But
DOT.
what we
And
don't
DOT.
have is the legal interpretation of sort of what David was getting at, of the potential billboard.
Right, that's what,
We don't have
if
that.
we have a green light on it not being falling under the categorization of a billboard, I have less of a concern.
I am struggling with this, because, John, I'm 100% with you. We need to improve signage, but I think my stance is with, we have the entire planning board and knowing the experience that, of those on the planning board, in addition to SMPDC taking that stance. I can't discount that. I think it's sort of gung ho as I was about this initially. I think sort of hearing that testimony, I guess, from Jeff, and hearing it, I know we saw it in writing, but hearing it was a little bit different. But I think, Abby, your suggestion of consulting with legal to see if that interpretation of the Maine state law makes this, yeah, would be good. And, sorry if I may, you're right, John, we're not in 1978 anymore. And I know that Aubrey's is there because of the internet and social media, not because I drive by. And I know that there's a place to get a massage there because of the internet, because it's 2021. And so I think we are in a little bit of a different place but that
Tell
we
that
were
to the
before,
people
but
that can't
I'm
pay their
beating
rent.
you.
No, tell that to the people that can't pay their rent, that are struggling right now because nobody knows where they are. And I agree, planning board brought up a lot of great things, but a lot of what they brought up, to me, isn't relevant. Well, they had a lot of what ifs. Well, what if we do this there, then what if somebody down here wants to do it, or what if somebody wants to advertise for outside of the business? Well, what if lightning hits the building and it's not there tomorrow? I have played the game too. It's not about what ifs, it's about facts right now. We base all decisions on facts. Facts are, if we say in the industrial zone, you can do this, then that's what you can do. That doesn't mean you can do it downtown. Let someone come to us and ask. Let them bring a lawsuit and ask. But we can't plan for everything. But we can make it so they can have a sign in the industrial park. We set that as a tip zone to build that area because it's the only area South Berwick has that's viable. Drive down 236. There are signs all over the place. They're not asking for a sign like the Fox Run Mall. They've scaled down their sign. And if we want to reach out and find out if it constitutes a billboard, I'm okay with that. But by the next meeting, we need to have a decision for these people.
Sure.
We owe the business owners a decision,
Agreed.
one way or the other. And that's why there's 4 or 5 of us. We'll vote however
Yeah.
it goes. And I'm good with whatever way.
Yeah,
can I suggest that we, as a next step, we reach out to Phil and find out if this constitutes as a billboard? Just keeping an eye on the time. We've got 2 more items to cover before 9 o'clock.
Can I make a suggestion? That I don't have it in here. But I do recall seeing in correspondence, the memo from David Galbraith that referred to the 1978, I believe it was 1978 law. So I think that might be helpful
I remember seeing that.
for the attorney. So at least he has a reference, and so we're not gonna, build freight.
Rack
without-
up the,
Yeah, so in other words,
give them a
they
cheat
don't
sheet.
have to go looking for it.
Of course.
We'll look for that, because that's
That's
the point that we're trying to resolve. I'll give you my opinion. I think we need to do something, and it needs to be appropriate. And I'm the last one that wants to see avoided condition along our roads, but I think this might stop short of all that. So we have to try and find a middle ground. I guess that's why we get paid $200 a year. Okay, so clear on the direction of the,
Yes.
and we'll put on the agenda for next time.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Now we have some real business to talk about, on the real business of the town, which not to diminish any of the other foregoing conversation, but this is dollars and cents. Jennifer, why don't you proceed?
Craig, who's the assessor, and I have worked diligently together in putting up this options of mill rates for going forward for the fiscal year 22. We right now have very healthy undesignated fund. And with the overlay, considering which overlay you want, that is a safety net to make sure that you don't have to use too much of your undesignated, should you have to do any abatements. So I am gonna propose, and Craig agrees with me being the assessor, that we go with a mill rate of $15.54, which is almost $2 less than what it was at $17.50. This leaves an overlay of $3,648. We can't go a penny lower because it would put it into a negative amount for overlay. And with doing this rate, we only have 165 people, town residents, not businesses, residents, that would have an increase in taxes. Of that 165 people, 96 have noted reasons of new outbuildings, remodels, garage, whatnot. So that only leaves 3% with a increase of less than $20 annually.
Well, thank you. That achieves the goal that I've felt, without a rational thing like this in front of me, but I really think that given the times that we really need to give as much back to the people as possible. And I appreciate the effort to do so. And in terms of, there is a real deadline here as well. Our current assessing assistant is, our assessing agent is getting done in a few days.
Thursday is his last day.
So Jennifer needs some time to work up the documents associated with setting the tax rate and all those forms that we love to look at.
And I would have those ready for you at the next meeting on August 10th.
So we'd set the tax rate at the next meeting and then designate the overlay and have the report done. So thank you. Any other comments? Start with Keegan.
And
Are these counselor comments?
No.
Well
on
done,
the
Jen.
item.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you for all the hard work and dealing with us on a regular basis.
Absolutely. Great. I'll have Craig write up everything to have ready for us for next meeting.
Okay, I meant to ask if the public had any comment on suggested tax rate, mill rate. Okay, and the last piece is that with regret, we have a resignation letter from Keegan, effective the 31st, I believe it is.
yeah,
Is your last meeting?
yeah, I'll read the letter too. It says to the Town Council of South Berwick, with this letter, I'm formally submitting my resignation from the Town Council of South Berwick. I will be relocating to New Hampshire and will no longer be resident of South Berwick and thus will be ineligible to serve. The past 2 years have been an amazing experience. The council, along with the staff and the citizens of this town, have taught me so much. For that, I'm extremely grateful. It has been a great pleasure to serve alongside my fellow council members and an even greater pleasure to serve the community of South Berwick. And I'm going to say this will be my last meeting.
Well, thank you for your service.
Thank you guys. It's been awesome serving with you. I've learned like a lot more than I thought I would. So it's been great. I would really wish I could stay. If it was allowed, I would, but I don't think any laws or anything like that.
We can check with Phil and make sure.
Yeah,
Anyway.
Yeah, we're gonna run up a big bill with Phil.
Throw another question.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Okay,
We need a motion.
No, we need to do comment.
just to go to council member comments. We have a few minutes to do that, Sean.
Keegan, thank you. It's been a great 2 years. I appreciate you being here. You brought a different view. And good luck and do well with your next endeavors.
Thank you.
That's all I got.
Good luck again.
I wanted to say that as well. I thought it was such a unique experience we've had since you've been elected, that you were in your teens. I know now you're in your 20s, but we had someone in their 20s, someone, not to out everybody, but 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. I thought that's such a neat, like, microcosm of where we
Yeah.
live, you know?
If we said that, we'd be in trouble, Jack.
I
I can't get away with that.
I'm the one that really out of myself, but
Well, you got 4 more minutes. Keep going.
so anyway, sorry for all the personal divulging of information there, but so thank you so much. And
I'm good with 60s.
yeah, okay, all right. So thank you. That was it.
I want my nickel back.
Is it my turn? I just want to again thank the community. I've had the great pleasure of growing up here, going through the school system. Amazing town. I'm excited to leave, but I'll be sure to come back and visit.
Thanks, Keegan. Appreciate
Good
you
luck.
stepping up.
Thank you.
Good luck in I'm sure we'll see you.
Definitely.
Don't be a stranger. I'm all set.
Really? Mr. Chairman, I move we adjourn.
Second.
Let me get that one. Keegan.
I should have let Keegan do that one. I
Yeah,
apologize.
anyway.
Okay.
Hi.
All right.
Aye.
Bye.
Barbara, I got my book.
Yay.
Just leave this here then.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah, just say yes.